everyone, I'm Vladimir Dutip. We are watching all the news happening in the United States and around the world. As always, I remind you to take a look at these screens behind me. These are the feeds that are coming in to the CBS News Broadcast Center right here on West 57th Street in New York City. If it's happening in one of our stations or affiliates around the country, we're going to bring it to you live right here, CBS News 24/7. So let's begin. President-elect Donald Trump rings the opening bell on Wall Street as he becomes Time's Person of the Year. We'll go live to the New York Stock Exchange. Plus, the largest single-day act of clemency in modern history. What we know about the hundreds of commuted sentences and dozens of people President Biden pardoned this morning. And breaking news out of Syria, where an American man claims he was freed after 7 months in a Syrian prison. We'll hear directly from him. That's ahead. This is CBS News 24/7. There from the New York Stock Exchange, where earlier folks there received a visit from President-elect Donald Trump as he rang the opening bell. This comes as Time magazine announced Trump as its 2024 Person of the Year. It is the second time he received the honor. Trump was selected back in 2016 after winning the presidential election over Hillary Clinton. This is the thing with Time magazine. When the president, whoever is elected, wins, they are Person of the Year. I want to bring in CBS News Money Watch correspondent Kelly O'Grady and CBS News contributor J.D. Durkin for more. They're both live at the New York Stock Exchange. J.D.'s on the floor, and Kelly is just right outside. So Kelly, let me begin with you first. Just describe the moment, the president-elect of the United States of America arriving at the center of capitalism in the United States.
Yeah, this is a very symbolic moment, JD, right? Ringing the bell at the New York Stock Exchange, that is a symbol of capitalism. And I'll just kind of show you, I mean, the crowd is still here, but this was actually all the way backed up to where I was. The president just left. We even have a sniper that's packing up there. So security was really tight, but we heard chants of USA, USA that moment when he rang the bell. And people out here, they were waving, and clearly a lot of excitement for the president's visit to the NYSE.
JD, let me go over to you now and ask you about the PPI, which rose 0.4% last month. And unemployment claims, as you know, also rose to their highest level in 2 months. Kelly and I spoke a little bit about this yesterday. What's your reaction to the data?
Yeah, maybe not a big surprise. This was a hotter than expected, at least a little bit, last piece of inflation data. But that is a really important one, Vlad. We can't forget, coming up next Wednesday on December 18th, that's going to be the final Fed decision of this calendar year 2024, which means this piece of inflation data we got today, that's really it for the Fed to head into that two-day policy meeting. We do get PCE, which is arguably the most important Fed reading coming up at the end of next week. But overall, I think all this underscores the challenges for President-elect Trump and the incoming administration. I read carefully the interview that President-elect Trump did with Time magazine, and he admitted, it's pretty tough to get actual deflation in terms of things like grocery prices, which a lot of economists say you don't want. You actually don't want to see prices necessarily come down. You want to see a strengthening of real wages across the board. So a really important piece of economic data that we got earlier today. Markets kind of pulling back a little bit off the news, but it underscores the challenges that the man who rang the opening bell today will face when he takes the oath of office.
Indeed. And Kelly, on social media yesterday, President Biden says the economy that he's leaving behind is stronger than ever for all Americans. It's something you and I have discussed several times, that how the data shows that the economy is strong, but sometimes folks at home aren't feeling the effects of that strong economy. The president-elect ran on a platform saying he could even improve on where we are today. Is that going to be challenging, or is there just an upward trend that we're just seeing here that is, that he's going to catch those headwinds?
It's going to be very challenging. I think that JD just made an excellent point about the economy that the president-elect is inheriting. It's a very delicate balance with inflation starting to tick back up. And then, as you and I have talked about, wages have been rising faster than inflation. But of course, if that gets out of balance, then that spurs inflation. And that's really going to be when people finally feel it in their wallets. Because to your point, Vlad, yes, the top line numbers show that the economy is in a good space. But when you go to the grocery store, you're feeling, well, wow, my dollar doesn't go as far. And so when you see the president-elect suggesting that he may impose tariffs. I think that's where, with the delicate balance he's inheriting and then potentially imposing these types of things, it could be a really, really tough tightrope to walk, Vlad.
Yeah. JD, the president-elect has threatened to impose tariffs when he takes office. What's the mood on the street about that?
Probably a mixed bag, to be fair. I think if you talk to certain CEOs or certain business leaders, they're inclined to support tariff policy. And we can't forget, despite the consternation in the 2020 campaign, the Biden-Harris presidency largely kind of quietly kept in place a lot of the tariff policies from the preceding Trump administration. A mixed bag, I think, overall is kind of the corporate mood because, yes, it does end up being a final tax on us, the American consumer. But I think people also know that President-elect Donald Trump has a unique negotiating style, to say the least, and that he'll likely try to use the tariffs back and forth to exert some pressure on key countries or key companies in those countries. It is worth noting here, Congress has largely ceded tariff authority into the executive branch, meaning it's not really something that Donald Trump needs Congress for, right? That'll come time for budget reconciliation and tax cuts and some of those more difficult things, but tariffs will be front and center on the Resolute desk, and I expect to see a lot of momentum on that in the first few days of his term, Vlad.
All right, Kelly, JD, thank you both very much. Appreciate it. All right, turning now to some breaking news out of the Middle East, where CBS News has spoken to a man in Syria identifying himself as Travis Timmerman. He says he's an American from Missouri. He says he was detained in the country for months after crossing in from Lebanon. Our Elizabeth Palmer has more.
I spoke with Travis Timmerman just a short while ago. He was a little dazed, but remarkably in very good spirits.
The first we knew of him was in a social media post this morning showing a bearded man on a mattress, and local people claiming he was an American prisoner who'd been locked up in one of the regime's most notorious jails. We found the house about 15 miles south of Damascus, and there was Travis Timmerman from Urbana, Missouri.
How are you feeling?
Good.
You look well.
Timmerman had been imprisoned for 7 months after crossing Syria's border illegally on a Christian pilgrimage.
What was the hardest part for you being in prison?
There wasn't a hard part. It wasn't too bad. It wasn't bad. I was never beaten. The only really bad part was that I couldn't go to the bathroom when I wanted to. I was only let out 3 times a day to go to the bathroom. So that was quite the hardship.
And you had food and water?
I did.
On Sunday night, the prison guards vanished, and Monday morning a group of local men broke down the doors and let everyone go into a brand new Syria whose dictator had been toppled by Islamist fighters. Timmerman had no idea.
The men who freed you are the fighters who just come down from Idlib. So they've taken all the main cities in Syria. They're now in control. Did you know that?
No. All I've heard is that the old president he left, and that there's a new government.
You got more than you bargained for, maybe.
Huh. Well, I'm here.
You're alive.
Yeah.
With no idea that the dictator Bashar al-Assad was gone, Timmerman decided to try and walk out of Syria secretly. He was on his way to Jordan when some local people found him this morning in an orchard. The State Department says they're aware of reports of an American who's just been liberated from a Syrian jail, and they are attempting to provide support. Back to you.
All right, Liz, thank you very, very much. This morning, President Biden unveiled the largest single-day act of clemency in modern history. The White House says he is commuting the sentences of some 1,500 people and pardoning dozens more. Joining us live right here in Studio 55 is CBS News senior White House and political correspondent Ed O'Keefe.
Good to see you.
Good to see you here.
Yeah.
All right.
Love what you've done with the place.
Very, very good decorating skills I have. All right, so let's talk about these clemencies and these pardons. What struck you about them?
Well, that they've come so quickly after the pardon of his son, Hunter Biden, and amid a lot of concern among Democrats that perhaps the president is failing to use those powers for everyday Americans who are perhaps more deserving than his son, or at least deserve consideration. These 1,500 are mostly people who were under home confinement during or in the wake of the pandemic. A lot of prison officials, jail officials had sent people into home confinement so that the virus wouldn't spread. At this point, he's essentially saying your sentences are over for now. The 39 who've been pardoned, a mix of nonviolent, mostly drug offenses, similar to his son's issues. But we don't yet know who exactly these people are. The White House hasn't released the names, so we're waiting to hear. And we know that there are probably going to be another few rounds of these leading up to the last 6.5 or 5.5 weeks to go in this presidency. Will they include people like the son and daughter-in-law of Jesse Jackson? The Reverend has asked that the former congressman and the former alderwoman in Chicago be pardoned. Will it include a certain environmental lawyer who's been become a cause celeb for a lot of Democratic lawmakers? Or will it just include a lot of everyday Americans, like people have said, who are deserving of this? We'll wait and see. But clearly, if he's moving this quickly on them, it's a sign that they've heard the reaction to this. And while they can appreciate that he pardoned his son, they're perhaps not so thrilled that he did his son first and didn't necessarily consider all these other people.
Really, really interesting. Let me switch gears and ask you about something that I didn't realize until the news broke yesterday that was sort of unique in American history. The president-elect invited the leader of another foreign nation, and this foreign nation happens to be China, to come to the inauguration next month. And I could be wrong about this. This is not common, right?
So we looked, and State Department keeps records all the way back to 1874. And there's no sign of any foreign leader, head of state, ever coming to an American presidential inauguration.
For me and a lot of other just sort of everyday Americans, you would think in your head that, one of our, like the Prime Minister of Britain or the President of France would be here, but no.
They all get together at coronations, big papal funerals, global summits, but they've never come to an American inauguration. And I think, for example, of inaugurations in Latin America, the King of Spain usually comes. A bunch of the other neighbors show up, right? If Brazil's doing it, then half the continent shows up in
Same thing with
Brasilia.
Africa. Like when there's an African head of state, all head of states show up.
But they've never been invited by the states. So now, yes, we learned first, our Jennifer Jacobs reported that Xi Jinping has been invited shortly after the election. Trump did so. Unclear if he has accepted the invite, but the Chinese confirmed that he received it. Very likely there will be other foreign leaders, not only invited, but who may also plan to attend. Who they are?
What are the people attached to the transition team saying about why?
They're saying that, yes, that the president did this, that there is precedent inviting ambassadors or other foreign officials that aren't heads of state to inaugurations, and that is true. There's usually a diplomatic corps there. So why not do it? I think what's going to cause some pause for his critics is you had to invite China first.
Yeah, that is.
Why not the UK, Canada, Mexico, France, or some others? And they may have been invited. They may be invited. But the fact that it was China when he's also threatening tariffs and all the other issues geopolitically is notable. But a sign that he intends to continue engaging these guys when he becomes president.
Wow, really fascinating. Ed O'Keefe, great to have you here.
Good
Come back anytime. Even if Dua Lipa's not on the CBS mornings.
We're here because Trump's here.
Yeah, I know. I'm teasing. I've been teasing you all morning long. I love it. Thank you, Mary. We appreciate you as always. Okay, let's talk about those rapidly intensifying wildfires in California, which continue for a third straight day. Containment is still in the single digits despite the around-the-clock water drops on the ground battles against what crews describe as walls of fire. What began as just a brush fire has now, in just 5 acres in size, has now destroyed some 4,000 acres and counting. CBS News correspondent Carter Evans is live in Malibu this morning covering the very latest for us, and he joins me now to talk about it. So what's the progress being made there, Carter?
Well, we're waiting for an update from fire commanders, but I can tell you right now, there are no flames in sight. There is no plume of smoke, so that's really good news. You can see behind me, this is one of the structures that burned. This was actually a little guest house. If you look back there, you can see the TV on the wall. It gives you an idea of what some people are going to be coming back to, and that's probably what they're going to be talking about now is when to let these evacuees back. That could happen as soon as tomorrow.
We're also hearing how some folks in Hollywood have been affected by this. And by Hollywood, I mean the Hollywood community, movie stars and famous people.
Yeah. A lot of famous people live in Malibu. A lot of pricey homes here. I was looking down at an estate over there, and my producer was saying that used to belong to Kelsey Grammer, not anymore, but Dick Van Dyke is one of the neighbors right down there. He's been evacuated. Cher lives right down Pacific Coast Highway. They've been evacuated. So gives you an idea of just the celebrity that's living here. I mean, the homes are really expensive where we are. The home here, which is not damaged, fortunately, worth about $4 million. I was looking at that estate down there on Zillow, worth about $20 million. So these are very expensive homes up here.
So for an East Coaster like myself, Carter, who struggles to sort of get a lay of the land out there in California, especially Southern California, has Malibu not ever been affected by a fire of this size? Because you do have all these movie stars living there. And if I'm me, I'm thinking, why would I want to buy a house which is susceptible to a big fire?
Gosh, you know, I wish we could, we're not set up to turn the camera around, but what I'm looking at is a breathtaking ocean view, and that's why people live here. It is a fire-prone area, extremely fire-prone. About 6 years ago, they had the Woolsey fire that raced through here. It burned about 400 structures. So this is a very fire-prone area, and, you know, I don't know if it's something that a lot of people think about when they're moving into an area like this. They're looking at the view, they're looking at the beautiful homes, things like that. Once they get in here, you know, they start getting letters in the mail from the fire department reminding you about brush clearance laws and things like that. You have to clear the brush around your home so that it's less likely to catch your home on fire, and it makes it more defensible space, easy for firefighters to fight. But this is definitely a wildfire-prone area.
Carter Evans with that important context for those of us who don't live in California. Appreciate it as always, my friend. Thank you. All right, let's bring in CBS News Philadelphia meteorologist Grant Gilmore with the first look at the national forecast. Hi, Grant.
It's a fascinating conversation, Vlad, you know, just getting an idea of the lay of the land out there because, you know, out there, conditions can change very quickly because of the mountains to the east and on all the interactions with the valley as that air comes in off of the mountains, the Santa Ana winds really fueling those fires earlier this week. A change in the pattern has really changed the conditions, giving incredible improvement to portions of Southern California. In fact, green on the radar means there's got to be some moisture out there. In fact, a lot more moisture. Now, we're not going to get a ton of rain in L.A., but about a 30 to 40% chance for some light showers as we see the tail end of several rounds of systems that will bring rounds of rain to the West Coast. So rain in the lower elevations, snow in the higher elevations, and we're going to see several rounds of that as we make our way through the rest of the week and into the weekend. Meanwhile, pleasant conditions continue across the plains, but that Arctic air is fueling more lake effect snow in the Great Lakes. We'll talk about that here, Vlad, in just a little bit. But good to see some improvement over on the West Coast.
Yeah, really much needed improvement. Grant, thank you very much. All right, police now claim they have hard evidence connecting Louis Mangione to the murder of the UnitedHealthcare CEO. Those details next. You're streaming CBS News 24/7. Investigators say they now have evidence linking Luigi Mangione to the scene of the crime where UnitedHealthcare CEO Brian Thompson was murdered. And the suspect's mother filed a missing persons report just days before the shooting. Let's talk to CBS News correspondent Lilia Luciano about these late-breaking developments. So Lilia, first, what are those key pieces of evidence that police say link Mangione to the scene of the crime?
Good morning, Vlad. Well, some of what the NYPD revealed last night includes fingerprint analysis, which showed, according to NYPD Crime Lab, that those prints that were collected from a water bottle and a Kind bar, a wrapping from a Kind bar, nearby that Starbucks, where you might remember there was video surveillance of before they had a suspect, that the prints found on that match the suspect who was arrested here, in Altoona, Luigi Mangione. They also found a single, according to NYPD, a single fingerprint on a cell phone that was found in an alley near the crime scene. They say that's also a match. They're saying that those 3 bullet casings, which you might remember we were reporting had the words deny, delay, and possibly depose written on them with a Sharpie, that those, according to ballistics analysis from the NYPD, match the ghost gun that Mangione was found with when he was arrested in Altoona. There's also that spiral notebook, which seemed to have statements describing, they said, a to-do list, and seemed to have statements describing a possible choice for an attack, where he writes about choosing a gun over a bomb to save other or to not affect other victims. We're also learning that there have been very helpful tips to the NYPD, and sources tell CBS News from the NYPD that of about 400 tips that have come in, 30 were helpful, which I think is a pretty relevant number. And something else that I'm learning today from the Corrections Department here in Pennsylvania is we are in front of the prison here in Huntington where Mangione remains until he's extradited. He is not he's not in solitary confinement. He's not under any kind of suicide watch or psychological order. They tell me that he is not having access to other inmates. He's in a cell by himself. That I asked whether he can go outside. You can see that yard behind. They say not at this moment, but at every level, every inmate does have access to that, so he will. So this is the latest information that we're getting from corrections. His attorney is fighting the extradition, has said that he will plead not guilty, and we're still awaiting that extradition order or warrant from the governor of New York to the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania and the steps that might follow. We have also learned, sources from the NYPD have told CBS News that when he is extradited, that there are conversations about changing his charge from second-degree murder to premeditated first-degree murder, which in the state of New York is an extremely high bar. And what law enforcement and legal sources tell me, in New York, different from other states, is only safe for people who kill police officers or witnesses. And it's generally not something that people are charged with.
All right, Lilia, thank you very much. Really in-depth reporting there. We appreciate it. And in our next half hour, CBS News will look into how this murder investigation has stirred a larger conversation online about the healthcare industry. So you're going to want to stick around for that. Meanwhile, back in D.C., FBI Director Christopher Wray says he's resigning amid pressure from President-elect Donald Trump. What it means for the agency, that's coming up next. You're streaming CBS News 24/7. Here's a look at some of the top stories we're following for you this morning. A missing woman from Hawaii has been found safe, according to her family. Hannah Kobayashi's family reported her missing last month after she missed a connecting flight from Los Angeles to New York. Police said she later bought a bus ticket to the border and crossed into Mexico voluntarily. Her family did not say where she has been. Dashcam video shows the terrifying moments before a small plane came crashing down onto a busy Texas highway. The plane hit several cars yesterday in Victoria, which is about 150 miles southwest of Houston. 4 people were taken to the hospital and are expected to be okay. Officials believe only the pilot was on board at the time of the crash. South Korea's president is defending his decision to impose martial law last week. During a televised address, President Yoon said he did it to protect democracy and vowed to fight to the very end. The embattled president is set to face a second impeachment vote this weekend. Earlier today, South Korea's parliament voted to impeach the country's national police chief and justice minister over their roles in the failed attempt to impose martial law. All right, back now to one of our top stories. President Biden has announced the largest single-day act of clemency in modern history. The sentences of more than 1,000 people are being commuted, and dozens of folks are getting pardoned. CBS News White House reporter Willie James Inman has more on those clemencies rolling out, and he joins me now from the White House to discuss. So Willie James, who will these clemencies and pardons apply to?
Hey there, Vlad. Good to be with you. Well, the White House isn't giving names just yet. We've reached out to confirm who these individuals are, but the White House has said in this announcement that President Biden will essentially give clemency to nearly 1,500 individuals. He will also pardon 39 people for nonviolent offenses. Now, the president did put up a statement, and I want to read part of that statement. It says, America was built on the promise of possibility and second chances. As president, I have the great privilege of extending mercy to people who have demonstrated remorse and rehabilitation, restoring opportunity for Americans to participate in daily life and contribute to their communities, and taking steps to remove sentencing disparities for nonviolent offenders, especially those convicted of drug offenses. And the president will likely have more to say in terms of these clemency actions later on. The the White House says, but this is a historic moment. One, the White House says, is essentially the most amount of clemencies granted by a president in a single day, Vlad.
We also learned yesterday, Willie James, that the FBI director, Christopher Wray, will be stepping down. Now we know about another departure, the FAA administrator, Mike Whitaker. What are you hearing about that?
Yeah, this is something that we just got word of moments ago. Mike Whitaker, the FAA administrator who has been serving in that position and confirmed last year, been serving in that role for just over a year now. He was he essentially was sworn in for a 5-year term. Now, it's not the norm that the FAA administrator steps down in this way. They usually serve out their terms. But I also note there was a period of about a year or so when we went without an FAA administrator. So planes will continue to fly. People will be able to continue to get on those flights. But the timing of his resignation, January 20th, 2025, the day President-elect Trump is sworn into office. So certainly the timing there is suspect. I'll note that in a statement to his colleagues there at the FAA, he didn't necessarily give a concrete reason as to why he was leaving, but that date of January 20th, 2025 is certainly raising some eyebrows here in Washington, Vlad.
All right, Willie James Inman for us this morning. Thank you. So that news that Willie James just talked about, that the FAA administrator will resign, comes less than 24 hours, as we indicated, after FBI Director Chris Wray also announced he'd step down. He said it was not an easy decision for him, but one he believes is in the best interest of the Bureau. For more on the future of the FBI, let's bring in Chris Piotta. He's a retired executive assistant director with the Bureau and the author of Wanted, the FBI I Once Knew. So we had talked about this earlier, about the potential of Director Wray stepping down, given that he was under pressure from the president-elect. So in your mind, in your estimation, did the director take the high road here by resigning when he saw the writing on the wall?
Good morning, and thanks for having me back. I think he did the right thing for the organization. He did the right thing for the incoming administration. So yeah, it wasn't a matter of if he would do it. I think it was more a matter of when he would make the decision to step aside, as the president-elect had already indicated he would like to see a leadership change at the FBI.
So in a post on Truth Social, the president-elect called Director Wray's resignation a, quote, great day for America, and repeated complaints about things like the FBI's raid on Mar-a-Lago. Can you explain what the FBI's role actually is in a raid like that, and why the president-elect's anger may be misdirected?
Well, when you have it's being called a raid, but what they did was a search. They did a physical search of a location, which is routine FBI business. The FBI has to obtain search warrants from court officials to conduct such searches. The FBI does not conduct searches on its own authority. With the Mar-a-Lago situation, I spoke with some of my former colleagues, and the FBI officials, did not want to do the Mar-a-Lago search. They objected to it. They objected to the methodology which was put forward, and the folks I spoke with actually got into some pretty heated arguments with the Department of Justice officials who were moving for that action to be taken, and they were overruled by the FBI senior leadership. And I think where some of the discomfort is with Director Wray is that maybe it was felt that he did not fight enough to have that decision overturned.
So let's talk about the president-elect's choice to replace Christopher Wray. His name is Kash Patel. He's referred to the FBI as part of the deep state. He's promised sweeping internal reforms. He's promised to turn FBI headquarters into a museum dedicated to the deep state. The president-elect himself has suggested he would use the FBI to go after his enemies. How much of this is actually possible? And I sort of feel, Chris, that and you tell me, that it sort of belies the fact that there are thousands of FBI agents, men and women, and some who are not even agents, just the agency overall, that are working to protect Americans from terror-related threats to kidnapping and serial killers. I mean, all the things that the FBI does to protect everyday Americans is sort of overshadowed by some of these political machinations. I wonder what you think, A, is something like what Kash Patel is suggesting possible, and B, how do just sort of the frontline men and women feel when they hear that their organization that they've dedicated their life to is being considered something that is alien to them, the deep state?
Right. Well, I think a lot of the previous statements that are being attributed to Mr. Patel that he made on various podcast shows, it made for great podcast content. What he has to do now is settle down and figure out how he is actually going to work with the incoming administration, if he is successful in the confirmation process, to bring meaningful foundational change to the FBI. I mean, under Director Wray's tenure, the FBI has drifted towards some questionable or unfavored practices. The leadership environment has shifted in ways that a lot of folks are uncomfortable with. And I think Mr. Patel, he's being cast as a change agent. And if he can align himself with the chief executive's objectives and looking at a reset and reforged FBI, that'll bring it back to a position of trust and confidence. That'll be a good thing. Because right now, I think the American public's trust and confidence overall in the FBI is probably one of the lower points in recent history. As far as the president, the FBI being used in ways that it would be considered to be, I've heard the word payback used. That's just not going to happen. If we have principled leadership at the FBI and at DOJ, that will not happen. There are safeguards in place. There are policy safeguards. There are legal safeguards that, if put back into action and put back in place, the payback scenario is nothing more than hyperbole for the media.
Got it. All right. Thank you, Chris. Always great to have you. Appreciate it.
Hey, thank you, and have a great day.
You too. Lake effect snow is back in some areas of western New York this morning. Some parts of the region could see as much as 2 to 3 feet. In Erie County, a snow plow went into a ditch and overturned. Fortunately, everyone's okay. Let's bring in CBS News Philadelphia meteorologist Grant Gilmore with another look at the national forecast.
Vlad, it's that time of winter where we get these blasts of Arctic air. It moves over the relatively warm waters of the Great Lakes, and you get that cold air interacting with the relatively warm water, and it just produces a lot of that lake effect. So speaking of cold air, look at some of these temperatures currently. Marquette at 0. International Falls, 20 degrees below 0. You see some of the lake effect snow moving across the Great Lakes, and then downwind of the Great Lakes is where we're finding some of that lake effect snow. We've got winter storm watches and warnings. We've got lake effect snow watches and warnings all over the Great Lakes, and that's because of, like what you were talking about, all of that lake effect snow that's going to be continuing for at least the next couple of days. But it's coming by way, again, of that Arctic air that is invading the northern tier states into the Great Lakes and actually moving into the Northeast throughout the day today. Places like, well, we'll say Bismarck, currently 3 degrees, feels like temperatures at 6 below. So that Arctic air moves over the cooler waters. There's a closer look at some of those lake effect snow bands that are setting up. Places like western New York, like you were just talking about, could pick up an additional 2, and maybe some isolated locations could see close to 3 feet of snow. Also some lake effect snow over towards western Michigan. Now, still relatively pleasant across much of the central and southern United States. The West Coast beginning to see some moisture, precipitation. We've got low-level rain, higher elevation snow for parts of the Sierra Nevada. There's a lot of that rain that's beginning to move into the West Coast. Watch this, several rounds. In fact, a couple of storm systems, one moving through the area today. And then as we go into Friday, we'll see another storm system approach mainly the mid and northern coast up to the Pacific Northwest, but still showers, rain showers, and mountain snow into portions of California until we see even another system beginning to line up as we head through the second half of the weekend into early next week. Vlad, back to you.
All right, Grant, thank you very much. Coming up, there's been an outpouring of outrage in the wake of the UnitedHealthcare CEO's murder, not at the shooter, but towards the health insurance industry. We're going to look at the mounting anger next. You're streaming CBS News 24/7. The murder of UnitedHealthcare CEO Brian Thompson is prompting a polarized response, especially online. The outpouring of anger has provoked conversations about the health insurance industry and some of the challenges Americans are facing. CBS News correspondent Mark Strassman has been tracking the response.
It's very hard for me to be empathetic.
Free-floating outrage fuels this American moment.
They are wolves who want to kill you for money.
A targeted killing in Midtown Manhattan, a hooded gunman, and thousands of online posts like, "He's a hero," overwhelmingly side with a shooter.
This guy's bringing the country together.
In New York City, a hooded shooter look-alike contest brought cheap laughs. When shooting suspect Luigi Mangione was arrested in Pennsylvania, online hot takes doubled down.
Which one of you McDonald's employees ratted that guy out?
The web's new hot sellers: free Luigi shirts, deny, defend, depose coffee mugs, delivery before Christmas. Seemingly forgotten, Brian Thompson, UnitedHealthcare's CEO, murdered in cold blood. The 50-year-old husband and father of 2 sons was buried on Monday. But online voices see him only as the face of a $500 billion health conglomerate. In their eyes, the obstacle to affordable health care.
All right, let's bring in Mark Strassman for more on his reporting. Mark, thanks so much for joining us. Can you just give us a sense on some of those mixed emotions from some of the folks that you've spoken to? I know in your piece you talked to someone who was a medical ethicist, and even that person was struggling with the notion that an innocent man was gunned down, but also the anger that people have at the insurance industry in this country.
Yeah, but look, I think it needs to be said off the bat that the murder of Brian Thompson was abhorrent. I mean, gunned down on a busy street, Midtown Manhattan, and his family grieving not just a loss, but a senseless loss that must be both bewildered and hurt by so much of this reaction that you're seeing online, where you have Thompson has, in effect, become the face of an industry that so many Americans, millions of Americans, I guess, have had issues with because of denial of claims and delaying of claims and feeling as though they pay high premiums and yet have high deductibles. And so frustration with the system has been taken out on the killing of one of its chief executives. And yet we talked to an ethicist who had her own share of issues with a surgery, and there was a delay with a denial of payment a couple of days before the surgery was scheduled. And even she was conflicted about the whole thing. She, in effect, said, of course the killing is wrong. But when I asked her, were you sad but it happened? She said, no. And in effect, she was channeling the frustrations that we're talking about, you and me, and the frustrations that we saw in that piece, Vlad, where so many people have turned the murder into an expression of their frustration and turned the shooting suspect. They've created a halo effect of the alleged killer, and that, of course, is also bewildering. But it is clearly we're having an American moment here, where a murder just before dawn in New York City has come to represent something so much more.
Mark, I wonder in the conversations that you're having with these folks, if there's an understanding, not an understanding, but we often act as if the way things are in our country and our society are somehow the way that they're always going to be, that there's nothing that the average person can do to change the system. As you say, Brian Thompson was just the face of a system. He's not the system. And people yet continuously vote for politicians who are upholding the very system that they are angry at. In other words, you and I know that there have been some leaders who've tried to change the medical industry, the insurance industry, to provide Americans with more affordable health care. Going back to when President Clinton was in office, Hillary Clinton was a champion of that. And we have collectively as a society turned away from that. So I wonder if people have that sense of an understanding.
Yeah, it's obviously complicated, Vlad. I mean, and you're right. They see these problems as intractable. They don't feel as though anybody is their champion. They feel as though it's a David and Goliath kind of struggle. And they see the system as being rigged against them. And my sense is, looking at what the shooting suspect's 3-page note said, and is that in his own perverse thinking was maybe the reason why he allegedly kills this executive, because he represents a larger problem that nobody's doing anything about, and he's maybe in effect he's trying to send a message, and that's And that, of course, is deeply troubling. The frustration is understandable, but the way he tried to bring about change, of course, as I said, is abhorrent.
Yeah, I mean, I keep thinking just about his family, Mark, Brian Thompson's family, and his two young sons.
Absolutely.
Who are going to grow up without a dad. Mark, thank you as always for your reporting, my friend. Appreciate it. All right, the mystery continues about those strange drone sightings above New Jersey. The Pentagon has weighed in, but there is still a lot we don't know. What federal officials are saying, that's coming up next. You're streaming CBS News 24/7. We want to update you on a story we've been following. Those drones that have been spotted over New Jersey in recent weeks. The Pentagon weighed in yesterday saying they don't appear to be coming from overseas, but many state and local officials are on high alert. Let's bring in CBS News correspondent Tom Hansen, who's here in Studio 55 with us live in person, because you're usually traveling all around the country reporting. So let's talk about these drones. What are some of the leads about where they might be coming from?
Yeah, well, it's really anyone's guess at this point, Vlad. It's still a mystery. There's a lot of speculation out there, and that fosters an environment for a lot of rumors. One Republican Congressman, Jeff Van Drew, we spoke to yesterday, he has been pushing these claims that these drones could be linked to Iran, could be being launched off of some kind of mothership off the coast or in the middle of the ocean. Now, we asked him what, if any, concrete evidence he has for that. He didn't put any forward. The Pentagon, as you mentioned, denied those claims outright. And so this is still very much a mystery. A lot of frustration around the lack of answers as well. There was a closed-door meeting yesterday amongst mayors across the state of New Jersey. One mayor who we spoke to as well also told me that the contents of that meeting could have been wrapped up in an email. So they walked out of there with no answers, and we're still looking for clues as to where and who is sending these drones.
So interesting. I thought the best part of your piece from the evening news last night was when you spoke to a woman who owned like a shop or something, and she described the size of these drones. Because when I first started seeing this story, I just thought to myself, well, there are drones flying all over the place all the time. But she seemed to indicate that they were quite large.
Oh, yeah. She said that they were the size of a small car. They were flying at least 1,000 feet above the ground, and they were still visible. Now, these drones are coming out at night. They're being spotted at night, at least. And that's because of all the lights that are attached to them, which are red, green, and gold, according to people that we've interviewed. So the way that she characterized it was this was not some instance where some kids bought drones on Amazon and are flying them around to wreak havoc, that this is something much larger than that. But still, a lot to be seen here. One thing that we can say is that all the officials we've spoken to are urging the government to safely take down one of these drones, if that's even possible, to get some answers.
So your live shot yesterday was in front of a particular location, because if you're watching this broadcast and you're somewhere else in the country, you're like, why Jersey? Yeah. Where were you last night broadcasting from to wrap up your piece?
Picatinny Arsenal, which is a military base that is responsible for manufacturing munitions that go out to every branch of the U.S. military. And so that's one of the concerns here. These drones are not just flying aimlessly. They are being spotted precariously close to sensitive government sites, and that has people on edge.
All right, Tom Hansen for us here in studio. Appreciate it, Tom, as always. Thank you. All right, let's bring in CBS News Philadelphia meteorologist Grant Gilmore with the last look at the national forecast. Over to you, Grant.
Thank you, Vlad. Over on the West Coast, after a couple of days of some high fire danger, finally starting to see some moisture roll in, and that's going to be in the form of several rounds of rain in the lower elevations, snow in the higher elevations. Nice, or at least relatively pleasant across much of the central and southern United States, while Arctic air once again invading the northeast into much of really the northern tier into the northeast, with that lake effect snow machine really firing up once again. Some places in western New York could see 1 to maybe even 3 feet of snow. Those significantly below normal temperatures, though, begin to moderate across much of the country as we head through the weekend. Vlad?
All right, Grant, thank you very much. That does it for me, folks, but stay right where you are. After the break, Elizabeth Cook is live from San Francisco with all the news breaking coast to coast. This is CBS News 24/7.